Okay, we are back with another Between the Pages book chat, and today we have dark fantasy and horror author and thriller author, and basically all sorts of authoring
Yes.
of J.E. Taylor, and she's here to talk about her trilogy, Season of the Dragon, and we'll turn it over
Yes.
to her and let her introduce herself. So take it away.
Hi all. My newest release, Season of the Dragon. It's a trilogy omnibus edition that came out on Friday. Yes, it's Sunday, um, and it's about a woman who has been tasked with making a deal with the monsters who have taken over the earth in order for humanity to survive. She doesn't like the task, and she does not do very well in that first negotiation. So the rest of the story is about her and the dragon that ended up partnering with her, trying to stop the rest of the monsters from wiping out both dragons and humans.
Okay, so Barrett's excited,
Oh, thank you, Barrett.
and he says congratulations, and it's
Thank
supposed to be
you.
the release. Which
It's
he
like
corrected, but I won't put the correction
yes,
out.
yeah.
Okay,
It's
so
okay.
what inspired you to write a dragon themed urban fantasy type book? And
Well,
it's
the
kind of
covers.
dystopian too, so
Yes, it's yeah, post-apocalyptic urban fantasy. The covers actually, I got the covers and the idea just came to me, and I'm like, ooh, I can write that. It was fun.
yeah.
Yes, I
And
like dragons too.
if anyone knows Jane, they know her cover obsession. So
Yes, yes, exactly.
it's good you can match the imagination to the cover. So anyway,
Yeah. Most of the time, the covers that I've gotten have sparked the story versus waiting and getting the cover after the story. I've done that a few times too, but I'm not a waiting. I'm not patient either. So once I'm done with something, I want to get it out. So waiting for, the editor is hard enough. If I had to wait for the cover artists that I have, we're talking like 6 months to a year wait lists at this point. So sometimes longer. So
yeah,
getting them in advance
yeah. A lot of
does.
my flash fiction comes from video from pictures and stuff I see on
Oh yeah,
Pinterest and stuff. So
it's like,
I
ooh,
I,
there's
I
a
get that.
story.
Yeah. Anyway, so tell us a little bit about the main character. What's she like?
She's feisty. She's smart. She's resourceful. And she's not afraid to stick her neck out for her friends. Um, so, she's pretty badass in that respect.
So tell us about the world. It's a post-apocalyptic, as you said, and it has dragons. So, how
Yes.
did this all come about?
Well, I sort of took liberties with the pandemic. The beginning of the book takes place after the pandemic, after the monsters have come out because we were in quarantine and very quiet. So they were curious to see what was happening on, topside. So there was dragons, leviathans, and the sea serpents that took over the world. Basically, they disabled all our military installations and any um, global way to fight back against the monsters. So, now you're just looking at little militias that are trying to take them out, and it's very difficult because the leviathans don't have very many weaknesses. But my main character found one, so she was very coveted by the dragon because the dragon also ended up wanting to stop these monsters because they destroyed the dragon's family. So
So it's a bit of a revenge story on the part of the
yes,
dragons. That's
oh yes,
cool.
oh yes, and because dragons helped, destroy things on Earth, she's not very trusting of the dragon at first. So there's that whole building and breaking down of trust going on throughout the story.
Mm, sounds cool. So
And it takes place in New York City, post-apocalypse. So a lot of the skyscrapers are broken. There's no electricity because they've cut off that. So, the paths in the subways aren't running. But the subways are a means for humans to get around without getting eaten, basically.
Yeah, unless one of those leviathans shoots a tentacle up the sewers or something. So.
Yeah, well, or send their babies in there to.
Oh,
Yes, they do.
okay. Which brings me to a question I don't often ask, but how do you stand on killing characters? I know the answer, but tell the viewers.
um, I'm not shy about it. I have in more recent years been a little less likely to kill off main characters or key characters in a book. But there's a time and a place for justice to be served in some cases, or when the main character needs to grow in some way, that they lose somebody and has to deal with that loss and move on and go forward. So no, I don't have a qualm with killing people.
Okay, so we have a question from the audience here.
Mhm.
What sort of research did you do on your dragons? Did you create breeds?
I didn't really. I did a little bit of research into the lore of dragons, and yes, I do have different breeds mentioned. Like just like humans, they vary, over different areas of the earth. So the Middle Eastern dragon is different than the Western dragon. In certain components, and one has large wings, one doesn't. One looks more like a serpent. One, the one that's in my book is, winged and fire breathing. So
Yeah, the cover is definitely a typical Western style dragon.
yes,
So
exactly,
I'm assuming there's
exactly.
also like Asian
Yeah,
variants as well. Okay.
yes. Not highlighted in the book because I only took it in New York City and that's where it was focused, but the dragon was explaining all the different variants at one point. So
So did you do the same sort of research for like the sea serpents and that sort of thing?
yes, the sea serpents, I did a lot of research on the Hydra. So the sea serpents are a derivative of Hydra. Leviathans, I did some research, and sort of that was more along the lines of like a Godzilla more than more than the Leviathans of the ancient biblical times. So
Okay. So and now the all important question: is there a kraken?
no,
Oh,
not.
yeah, my favorite sea creature is the kraken. So.
Yes. Sorry.
Okay, so what was the hardest scene or type of scene for you to write in the series?
Um, the hardest thing was to remember that there was no electricity, to remember what a post-apocalyptic world would look like. Um, so doing a lot of stuff underground in the subways, I had to do a lot of research on the subway systems, more extensive than I had for the Running from the Devil series, which we had take place, start off in the subways. So I had to know where there were dead ends, where there were, things to the street, and what would happen if the buildings fell on them. So, so the research part of the logistics was the most difficult part.
Did you add any of the subway history? Because I know there's a lot of different things, and there's some blocked off access places in the New York subways from different.
Yes. Yep, exactly. Like the city hall entrance is not accessible anymore. So I had that as a place where they needed to get to, but they had a difficult time getting there. There are some unfinished paths that go down near there as well, that go down, and one has a dead end and one just goes, that the upper ones actually just fall down into it so that it just goes down to nothing. So that was an interesting one to play with. And those are, doing some of the research on the New York subways is interesting in that way. So,
Okay, so what was your favorite scene or type of scene that you wrote in the series?
My favorite scene was probably, see, I can't spoil some of it. I have to be careful on this. My favorite scene, well, I liked when she rode the dragon. She does get to ride the dragon in a piece, so I liked that. He needed to learn to fly again at one point, so that was always interesting, trying to teach him to fly in miniature versus his full full size, because he was able to shrink down, and expand as well. So that's one of his shifting capabilities. Yeah, without giving too much away, which is really tough. I
Yeah,
wish I had the book here, because the hardcover I have is beautiful, but it was wrapped and given to my dad for his 84th birthday.
oh, that's nice.
So, and my other copy hasn't come yet, and that's like 3 or 4 weeks out. So,
Okay, so tell us a little bit about some of the secondary characters. What are they like?
um, there are a few secondary characters. Mostly it's just, um, oh my God, Holly and Mikhail. Mikhail is the dragon. Holly is the main character. Um, for the most part, those two are the key characters. In book one, there are some ancillary ones that show up later in the book, but they're, they didn't have a great deal to do with the storyline in some cases. In other cases, they had a great deal. In the second book, there are another group of army folks who are fighting the dragons, that they are fighting the rest of the monsters that they hook up with. And they're, military based, macho, and don't really like to take directions from a woman, basically. um, the woman on their team loved having Holly around, because it was somebody who was her, equal, that she could, hang on to. But unfortunately, things happened. I've been, famous for.
Okay, yeah, we don't want to get into that because that might go into spoiler territory,
Yep,
but we can leave that
exactly.
to the imagination of people who know J.E. Taylor's writing.
Yes. And then, of course, there's the monsters. The Leviathans have a big role, and the sea serpent, the Serpent King, has a big role. He's a diabolical one who really doesn't want humanity around. So, that's the major fight between Mikhail and him when he was on their side and turned sides. So,
So, would you say that the Serpent King is the main antagonist of the series, or is there multiple antagonists?
yeah, he's the main antagonist of the whole series arc. So, he wants to stomp out anything in his way.
Okay, so what are your characters afraid of?
Becoming extinct, their whole species wiped out. That's the biggest fear of failing their own species, of not being able to do what they had promised to do.
Okay, I think that's a new fear for this show.
Mhm.
I don't think we've ever had species extinction as a fear before. That's interesting. Okay, so we get another question from
Mhm.
the audience. What advice do you have for writers that are new to making monsters that the audience care about?
give them some human qualities. Make them feel regret if they're monsters that have done bad things. Um, everybody has a regret if they do something that goes against their moral grain, and make them have morals. That's a big a big one. So whether it's morals that okay they won't. In some of my older books, I had a character, not a monster. Well, you could do this. Some people thought he was, um, but he wouldn't hurt kids. He was totally against that. Yeah, and he would kill a lot of other people, but kids were off limits for him. So as a bad guy, he had some morals. Um, but my monsters, um, the dragon, he lived as a human for many years because he was a shifter. So, he was sort of torn when he was given an ultimatum at one point, join us or die. Join us or your species dies, because he was the, king of the dragons too. So it was a dichotomy that he did what he had to do to survive, but he had a lot of regrets. So, making the monsters care about others is key.
Okay, so you write dark fantasy, obviously, but you also write other genres. You've
Yep.
written dark fairy
Paranormal.
tales, dark horror,
Yeah.
thrillers. So tell us a little bit about some of them.
Okay. I actually this year I've got two of my fractured fairy tales coming out. One and both of them are in sets. One of them is a retelling of Aladdin, and that's coming out in October in Rituals and Ruins. And all of my fairy tales are paranormal romance. And yes, they're dark. Most of them have dark themes because I can't seem to get away from that. um, and then the other one that comes out actually sooner in June in Alpha or Shifter Ever After. Um, in the Shifters Unleashed sets. That one is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, and Belle is the Beast in that one. So that's kind of a twist on it, but it's going to follow a little bit the core story. A lot of them have components of the uh, Disney and Grimm all mixed together. All those fairy tales from Disney and the old Brothers Grimm, because I have their stuff too. So the dark components and the romance components of Disney are all weaved in. um, and then I'm writing another urban fantasy that's coming out in first book in a new series in March, and it's a vampire huntress
Oh,
who becomes the hunted.
oh, that sounds interesting.
Yes, yes. So that one, I'm like 90% of the way done with that book, and I'm about 50% with the Beauty and the Beast that's due all in March. So
So lots to look forward to.
yes, yes. So when I told you before, I'm writing a little bit. I'm writing a little bit.
Yes, yes. But knowing your productivity, that sounds like a slow year for you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I have plans to get that trilogy, the new Shades of Night trilogy out this year. So there's three, and then I do want to write a prequel to the Season of the Dragon, which I have started, but that's more fantasy based because it takes place in pre-Mayan times.
Oh,
So that's going to be, I've done a lot of research on that, and there is a block of period of time that isn't recorded in any of our history because it was just wiped out. So I'm like, ooh,
yeah.
dragons.
Okay, so Barrett approves of your upcoming book
Yes.
schedule. Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up here for today. I'll
Okay.
let you tell everyone where they can find you and your books.
Okay. Season of the Dragon is on Kindle Unlimited. And all of the rest of my books are wide. And you can find all my titles at my website, which is www.jetaylor75.com. And I'm
Okay.
on Facebook and I'm, Twitter.
And don't forget, you can see her Saturdays on Spilling Ink as one of the hosts.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, it's one of my favorite author shows. So
Thank you, Anita.
where
It's a
they
fun
interview
show.
authors for an hour and all sorts of hijinks ensue. So
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
anyway, so thank you for being here. It was a pleasure chatting with you as always.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
And Between the Pages, we'll be back next week with another author. So join us then, and bye for now.